In the final hours of this day, I show you the dusk and yet the dawn of a new philosophy. Plato is called the father of philosophy, but Plato will tell you it's not me, it's Socrates. Socrates was the true father of philosophy. That's why all he writes about is Socrates. When Socrates was given his hemlock poison, Plato was around my age. He was in his 20s. He felt like he lost a father. He even says it like that in Phaedo, the description of Socrates' death. If, as one interesting person said to me in the shower, is true, it makes sense, actually. Why? Well, I've known for months and months and months here, even before anything involving Agenda 21, I knew that I was the mother of a new philosophy for an entirely new age. I thought, how can we even teach our philosophy curriculum that we have now? How can we even teach it? It is based on a third-dimensional construct. But the ancients knew. They did know. It was hard for Plato to believe it. He was always a bit of a skeptic at first. But Socrates never failed in showing him, no, I am right. And as the favorite student, he would learn as much as he could and profess it. And after Socrates died, as if it were his own father, he thought a few things. He thought, one, I'm not going to let that happen to me. I watched my teacher, like my father, die right in front of me. In a corrupt system here in Athens. But it will not happen to me. It will not happen to me. So what does he do? He cleverly writes his books as if Socrates is talking most of the time, for several reasons. Because one, it keeps Socrates alive in his heart. And two, if someone says to him, you are a heretic, he says, oh, no, I'm simply writing what Socrates used to say. And you already killed him, so that's the heretic. That was how he cleverly got around the system. And also kept what he felt like as his father alive. Here again now the mother of a new philosophy emerges. How are we to define knowledge? What is knowledge? What is reality? Metaphysics has always been the topic of the philosopher. Metaphysics, which means what is reality, and epistemology, what is knowledge. I will not say his name, though I know he can be found still. But I owe it to you, Professor. I owe much of this to you. How do we define reality? Metaphysics, epistemology, knowledge, ethics, which should be self-explanatory. Philosophy delves into 5 various regions, but generally the ones we focus on the most are epistemology and metaphysics, knowledge and reality, and also ethics. also aesthetics. What is beauty? And what is not beautiful? Plato knew that we came into this life with what is called a priori knowledge. Coming into this life with knowledge of from whence we'd come, having learned things in other lives, that the soul was immortal, and had always been that way. They knew. It took Plato a while to believe it, but finally he said, Socrates, I think you're right. But his knowledge was lost with Aristotle. Aristotle was Plato's student, kind of like the favorite student, but it was not like a favorite student type relationship, exactly. Aristotle was a begrudgingly accepting student of what Plato would teach, and would then eagerly set about upon his own course of ideas. He was very involved in biology, and he took on a Darwinian-type perspective that we are not born with innate knowledge, that there is not a soul that is immortal, and such. And so thus with Aristotle, we began to lose the innate knowledge which the ancient philosophers, the fathers of philosophy, knew to be true. But now they return, it seems. At least, I can blame somebody else on saying, oh, Krista, you wanted to know why you're obsessed with Socrates, but you know you were not Socrates, and yet you also say you know you were more than one prominent philosopher. Oh, this here is for you. And you wanted a confirmation that I really spoke to you. Here are your notes that you took on me. You took notes on me. Here they are. Ironically, if you watch the interview, I do not know what you could attribute that to exactly, but if you watch the interview with that person, you'd see that person is very empathic and very loving. I would not think it strange that as a confirmation, I would not just be given something physical to confirm that something occurred, but also, as I said, something productive for my life. Oh, if it is to tell me here is why you were obsessed with Socrates, because you shared a perspective with Plato. I think to myself, it is one thing to know that I was Friedrich Nietzsche. That's one thing. And I resemble the man so much that you can't say it's not really true. My life has gone about the same course as his did, the same disease, the same philosophies, same family problems even. Which is why I have to do what is called, I suppose, healing the Akash. Mining the Akash refers to figuring this stuff out in the first place, mining the Akash, mining your personal Akash. But then there is the matter of healing one's Akash. And the DNA is programmed to do this, as Cryon says. The DNA knows how to do this naturally for any human, he says. And so, as we go back into my Akash of philosophers, it is interesting. It is very interesting. Because I had thought to myself, I feel so incomplete knowing that, yes, I was this one man, or shared a dominant perspective with this one man. But who else is it? I would constantly question, who else could it have been? But I would not think to myself of the great famous philosophers now, for that is almost like an insult to their greatness. to say that I could have shared a perspective with any of them other than the madman. A very literal madman. How could I be one of those other greats? How could I truly come to understand the nature of knowledge, the nature of reality, metaphysics, of ethics, of aesthetics? What is interesting about Plato is that he was the first philosopher. Not even Socrates did this. Plato was the first philosopher to attempt to construct an entire philosophy that defined reality. Socrates focused on the basics. The idea was, how do we even define reality if we can't agree what any of these words mean? What is justice? What is truth? What vocabulary are we even using? Is what he would say. We must define these things first in order for us to even talk about what reality could be. And he was right. But it was Plato who put his words into action, into motion. After losing a father. He became one. The father of what we think of as modern philosophy. But philosophy is about to change. This is about to change very drastically as we enter fifth dimensional construct. What then of knowledge, and what then of reality, and what then of beauty, what then of good, and what then of evil? Plato was very much not like Nietzsche, not really, but they shared, ironically, similar philosophies. While the philosophies were different in ways, the similarities are there. And ironically, I found it in my own book that the allegory of the cave was very much Plato's ultimate description of reality along with the Republic. So, you're here on Earth, which is a cave of darkness, as a prisoner, tied up. Those of you who know the allegory of the cave. Most people are forced to read the allegory of the cave, which my one life would say, stop forcing people to read that. And Plato would actually say, oh, I agree with having them be made to read it because we want to create good citizens. Nietzsche would say, my God, what do you think you're doing? You're forcing them to do something they don't want. If indeed I have both perspectives, it is a very interesting dichotomy. Also interesting because if one reaches out for Plato, he is so far away. Instead of reaching to the 1800s, where the other man is not nearly so far away from me. In the cave, there's a fire where puppet masters create a play to hypnotize, essentially, the prisoners. And the prisoners talk amongst themselves, and they believe it to be all the reality that is. They believe it to be all that is. Then, a benevolent force comes and frees one of the captives. And the captive screams as they're taken up to the top, to the surface, to the true earth, the new heaven and a new earth. The captive protests and tries to get back into the cave, but the way has been blocked. Finally, his eyes adjust to the light, and he sees the most beautiful colors he'd ever seen in his life. Colors almost not earthly, of this realm, and realizes how much better it is there in that beautiful light. And he says, I must go back to tell the prisoners. He doesn't really want to go back, but the one who freed him says it's your duty. It is your duty to go back and tell them of this great thing, this great light. So the first prisoner does go back, but he's beaten, bound, and killed as a heretic to the puppets behind a fire. Every once in a while, this beneficial force comes and frees another prisoner. They have the same experience, and then go once more back down into the depths of the abyss of the cave to tell the other prisoners, you are imprisoned, and we must get out. There's a beautiful light up there. I've seen it. Let's go. And go back to it, where we really come from. It is easy now for many of us who understand our starseed nature, who understand that we are from stars, literally from stars, that this might as well describe the prison structure of the earth. It is like a great cave. It is like a great big huge cave, and every once in a while an angel comes and frees one of the captives here, just like who you watch before you now. She goes and says, I must tell the others. But they have such intense trouble understanding. How does one create a new philosophy? Of time rolled into one, of no space, of multiple dimensions. Plato believed, along with many of the great philosophers, that philosophy was the way to cleanse one's spirit, in a sense, and to ascend into these higher realms. Socrates, as you read in Plato's opinion, on his deathbed, appeared very certain that no, he would not be delving into the caverns of the earth. He spoke of them, caverns tunneled beneath the earth, and lakes of fire there. He said, oh no, I will not be going there. You can try to catch me, if you can. He was legendary. He remains a true legend, an inspiration. One who knew the soul was immortal. One who knew about the poetry of the Greeks, how it described, very literally, the creatures below, their caverns below, their tunnel structures below, and their multiple lakes of torment and sulfur below, their prison structure. While they didn't quite refer to it as a prison structure, it seems like Plato knew because he called the people in the cave prisoners, and explained that these were prisoners taken captive and born into their captivity by the puppet masters behind the fire. It seems perhaps he knew more than we think. How much did he know? This I will have to discover. A better question is perhaps, how much do I know? What the great true father of philosophy would say is nothing. When I was asked, I want you to write down something that you absolutely know exists. This was the phraseology. Something you absolutely know exists. And finally, in confusion, and with no more time left to consider a thought, I wrote, I am absolutely sure that I will never be absolutely sure if anything exists. It was the best answer. It was the only answer that one could not disprove, because it covered every angle of the philosophy. How does one say you know what exists when you know that you live inside of a holographic, mirrored reality? How does one incorporate this into modern philosophy? For it makes many of the greats, like Descartes, John Locke, simply obsolete. Every empiricist that you can think of. Empiricists meaning empirical knowledge. I touch something and therefore it's there. Probably the only thing that I will agree with Descartes will be I think, therefore I am. He seems to have gotten that quite right. We are conscious beings. We are conscious, but yet our philosophy has failed to acknowledge the consciousness of all other beings, like the chair, like a rock, like a cat, like a dog. Our philosophy has failed to acknowledge magnetics, auras, energy fields, portals, points, and ley lines, animals, magic spells, and sunshine. What of this? For in those olden days, they did not speak of a race and races from the stars. It was not that they did not know, but it was penalty of death that they speak of it at all. This was why Plato had to be so careful in how he phrased everything, why he used Socrates as his mouthpiece, even though he was stating most of Socrates' ideas in the beginning, but went on to simply use Socrates to state his own ideas towards the end. It is an irony that I always liked the works of Plato. In any philosophy class, you begin with Plato, because he was first. He was the father, even though he will tell you Socrates was the father, but he was the first one to write anything down and to get it in history, get it written down in history. He was the first who managed to actually get his material into the history books. And this, I think, his clever zeal, is what I will need to force my history, my philosophy, into those history books. In those days, they would give speeches like this for an audience in Athens, like an orator. Now, we have some kind of internet thing that we can use to do that for us. So many conveniences have made our minds lazy. We spoke of this in my philosophy class. The famous one I speak of, and the professor I will never forget. I looked at him and I said, yes, I agree. Sometimes I'll think to myself, oh, what's the definition of such and such? I'll look it up on the phone and then I'll think, oh my God, that was lazy. I mean, this thing right here to simply tell you whatever, there's no mental effort here. That is the very idea. As Immortal Technique says, read, nigga. Read. Read, nigga, read. This is why it is made so difficult now for us to read. Why everyone is encouraged to use this internet concept, because if the internet went down, nobody would be able to figure anything out. They'd have no books to do it with. They'd have no encyclopedias. They would not have their natural telepathic knowledge. What a philosophy of telepathy. What a philosophy of the, quote, 5 senses. For now there are more than 5 that we distinguish. And of those that we would call a 6th sense, we can delineate them into very specific categories. Clairvoyance, clairaudience, clairconsciousness, claircognizance. Many different skill sets. Telekinesis, telepathy. These senses must be defined and delineated. For in philosophy, the senses are both deceptive and what we rely on to even create our philosophy at all. What of this, my dear Watson? What of this? I knew already that I was going to be the founder of a new great philosophy for a great new age. But it is not new. We have been waiting for this age for a long time. And it has been waiting for us to return, to revolve once more, and to find our true selves again. For that is the concept behind all philosophy. Finding the true self. If we ask, what is reality and what is knowledge? And we discover it is also ourselves. Why, in defining those things, we also define ourselves. In seeking those things, we seek ourselves. I seek God, ich suche Gott. Ich suche Gott. I seek God, declared the madman. But he is not here. He wasn't there then. He was only hiding, only sleeping. Because he is here now. What one calls God, what one calls the Force, Luke, what one calls Source, Eternal Spirit, Light, Love of the universe, is here. And it was always here. We just were so blind that we could not even think to see it correctly. Now we are no longer blind, but in our blindness have forgotten so many things. These things are all within us. and simply must, as Socrates said, be birthed out. He called himself a midwife of knowledge, assisting in the birthing process of the soul. The birthing of the soul and of knowledge. We are reality. We know that now. We are knowledge. We know that now. But what do we do with it? Ethics. What do we do with it? We're going to learn. As I learn, so will you. On a very interesting dialectic here on Arcturian Philosophy. Blessings.